Sabine, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, this is really exciting. And I just, for the audience, I want people to know, often I have just even a brief conversation before the actual interview with somebody. But
Right.
today is a little bit of a surprise for everyone, right? Including you and me,
Yeah,
because this is the first time we're actually seeing each other and talking.
absolutely.
So we'll kind of see where this goes. And I'm so looking forward to just hearing a little bit. I know a little bit about you from the person that referred you, but we're just going to dive right in. And just for people to know, just share a little bit about what it is that you do. What is the nature of your work?
Okay, thank you, Gwen. So what I do is I am a real estate attorney. So I practice. I'm a lawyer. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a woman-owned business. I practice primarily in the area of real estate law. So I help buyers, sellers, and businesses invest in real estate, hopefully to build generational wealth for themselves and generations to come. And I mean, I can go into a little bit about my background, how I got to this point, or
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say that real estate is definitely a hobby for me, and we could have a whole conversation about that. So maybe at some point we will, because it's one of those things that it does build generational wealth. I'll just share with you that my dad was a fireman, but when you think of firemen, you don't think of crazy high salaries and things like that.
Mhm.
But he and my mom used to buy houses and fix them up and sell them. And so we, growing up, were able, my sisters and I had horses and riding lessons. And it was truly, it's that millionaire next door philosophy of it's not always about your paycheck, right? But if you invest smartly. So he kind of got me that bug. And that's part of, when I look at creating a life on my terms, creating passive income. So I love that that's what you're doing for just helping people to set up for themselves and generations to come.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's something that, we have it all around us. Like people are aware that, real estate is something that people invest in. However, they don't understand like how tangible it is and how attainable it is for most people. There's so many different ways and avenues and tools that you could use to help yourself be able to afford the opportunity to do that. And it really is, something that's going to continue to provide for you and your family for years. And people do it for as a career. You can do it on the side, you can do it as a career, you can, so many ways that you could take advantage of the opportunity.
And why are you so passionate about, I mean, there's so many different ways to go with law, right? And you have your own firm doing this, as you said, a woman owned, but why real estate? Is there a little bit of a story behind that for you?
Yeah, there is. So I didn't know that I was going to be practicing real estate law. When I was in high school, when I finished high school, I found myself working in a mortgage company. So someone was like, "Hey, our office is looking for someone." So I just started working in a mortgage company, and that's how I kind of got introduced to the field. I worked for loan officers. I worked for branch managers of mortgage companies, and I was a loan processor at one point. I worked for a bank, for Greenpoint Bank. And then I got to the point where I was like not sure if this was the path I wanted to go. I didn't have like the foresight to see like the potential for growth in it. And so I decided to, after I graduated from college, I decided to work for a venture finance company, which was interesting and definitely in today's day and age, it's an interesting market. But I did not find it interesting at the time. So I decided to go to law school because I kind of had it all in the back of my mind that I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I said, okay, like kind of was like a little bit lost and like, let's see if this is what I want to do. So I went to law school and then I enjoyed it. And when I got out, I wasn't kind of sure like which direction I wanted to go. And I ended up just falling back onto real estate because that's what I knew. And I actually learned to really love it and enjoy it. And as I started practicing the area, kind of opened up my eyes to all the possibilities that there is.
Yeah. So interesting that you went back to that high school that kind of planted a seed and then came back and now have your own firm. And when you talk, your eyes just light up about it now. So I love it. I love it. And Sabine, so there's an interesting piece too that I want to hear more about, which is, so you have the law side and focus on real estate, but I know that there's this spiritual side to you that is part of and integral to everything you do. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I grew up Catholic, so I didn't really, I personally didn't really learn to have like a relationship with God, you know, growing up in my faith. I knew of God and I did reverence God, and I kind of always had like in the back of my mind, like, is this pleasing to God? You know, that type of thing. But I didn't really know much about that type of relationship. And then like around, how old was I? Probably like 28. I joined a Christian church. And when I joined the Christian church, it was sort of like a completely different experience for me, where I really learned how to like connect with God and like experience God. And I felt like it was like something that was missing, you know, in my life, that, you know, I felt like connected or like put back on the right path. And so I feel like that guides everything that I do. Like every decision that I make, I kind of, you know, I feel like now I'm connected and guided by God in directions.
And, you know, so in the 7L framework, we talk about the first L in my framework is listen, right? And I know that means so many things to so many people. And for those out there, don't get mad at me, but I kind of consider myself a recovered or recovering Catholic, right? So I get you on that note. And for many of us, we're just kind of thrown into, this is what your religion is. And we have to figure out for ourselves what's right. And, you know, what is that or what isn't that?
Right.
And so, you know, that first L is all about listening. And I call it in the framework, your inner compass, that whatever that is, that when you're connected to that, when you're tuned into it, when you listen and pay attention, it helps guide you. Some people refer to that as God, right? Some call it your inner voice or your subconscious or your soul. And so for you, it sounds like you call that God. And how can you say a little bit about just that listening part? I mean, what did you sort of hear? How did you kind of get to that place of going, oh yes, this feels right? You know, how did you know you were connected to that?
So it took kind of a while for me to figure it out. But there was always something like underlying, like when I started my firm, it was very difficult. It's not easy, you know, starting a firm from scratch and like, you know, being young and being a new lawyer, all of those challenges. But I felt like within me that no matter what, you can't quit. Like you have to stick with this because this is the path. Like, and I didn't understand it. And I would say, God, why do you want me to do this? Like, this is not like making me happy right now because it's a struggle, you know? And so it was just always like, stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. And so that's what I listened to. And I learned that in not worrying and trying to like give God space, you know, kind of to like really speak to you and make things clear, that I was able to understand, you know, what next steps to take, or see him operating in things that I've done, saying, oh, this thing that you learned back then is now giving you the tools that you need now, or, you know, or even you should have taken that opportunity then because it would have helped you now. You know what I'm saying? Those type of things. And so if you give sort of like the space to allow that inner spirit to kind of speak to you, it will help, you know, guide you, even if it's not the way that you think that you want to go.
Right. And so this is like, I love this because we're in the juiciness of this, right? So two questions that I have. So how do you trust that? So when you're in that place, like you said, oh my gosh, it is hard, right? Starting any business and being young and being new and all of that. So and you weren't, like you said, having fun. I mean, how did you trust that to know that you were supposed to stick with it? Like, I mean, and when people say, I hear this thing, so a part of my goal with this podcast is to make some of these things that are abstract, to try to make them more tangible for people to get it, right? So, I mean, is it literally hearing something? Is it just trusting? Like, how did you know, okay, that's the thing that's the message I need to listen to? I mean, if you can, I know it's hard to put into words, but how did you know that that was what you were supposed to listen to?
So for me, I think it was sort of like twofold. Like I learned from missing opportunities. And then like, remember I said how, oh, had I done this back then that would have been useful for me right now. So then I think back to what had stopped me from going in the direction that would have taken me to that place where I would have had some sort of skill set, for now. And so I stopped fighting against things that felt like they were hard or scary. And when I stopped fighting against those things and kind of going for them, I would see the positive outcome. So then I would kind of learn from the experience and say, okay, so that was God trying to push me in this direction. And then I listened, and although it didn't feel good and it was scary, there was a good outcome. So this felt like it was right.
That's such an important, you said so many important things right there. So stop resisting. And it's so funny, Sabine, I've talked with so many people in the interviews, and a number of them have said that, like they just, either they were like, no, I don't want to go there, because almost like either I know what that will mean. I mean, maybe it will be success. Maybe I'm afraid of that. Or maybe, putting myself on a bigger platform or whatever it is, there's resistance like initially. And so what you're saying is like, surrender. And actually somebody that I just recently interviewed used that word, that just surrender and, to it. So you kind of know when there's that push pull inside of you. Right. And so you let down and said, okay, I'm going to give into this and trust this. And right. So you're obviously very analytical. So you kind of looked at the patterns and saw
analytical.
Yes. When I give into and I surrender, these things happen. So it's sort of surrendering and trust.
Right.
And another key word that you mentioned is space. Mm-hmm. And I talk about that so much on the show, that we're all like cramming so much in that in order to listen, you have to create space.
Right. Yeah. And for me, it wasn't that I had all the right answers or all the tools. It kind of like I fell into figuring it out, like I was saying, if I had a moment where either I prayed and then I allowed for space, then all of a sudden that would get clarity, and then it would take me a while to realize, hey, if you just continue to create the space, you'll get some clarity on what you're supposed to do. So it's not always perfect, but it's about kind of trusting. And I don't believe that God or the right source would give you the wrong thing to do, right? So it's either you're going to learn or it's going to just be great. You know what I mean?
Either way, it's right. And so when you talk about space, how do you create space? So for someone who's listening saying, well, what does that really mean to create space? How do you define that?
Okay. So for me, it's just trying to be quiet and be present. Like people talk about meditation and teaching meditation. I'm kind of new to it, so I don't preach about it, but I feel like that's what I was doing, not knowing that I was doing that, so like just sort of like being quiet and listening, or not always having some sort of noise or attention or something that's taking your attention in the background. So in those little moments is when I found clarity. And, now as things get busy and I get, stressed, I'm listening to people saying, no, you really need to like meditate, like, however they define meditation. And then that is a practice that helps you quiet the noise and find calm and peace.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're engrossed in that now, like you're trying to practice that more now.
Yeah, I'm trying to practice it more now, but what I'm understanding is that on a smaller scale, more simpler scale, I was doing it without knowing.
Yeah, just taking, and it can just be sitting quietly, right? I mean, if people are really asking, well, what is it? It's quieting your mind. And I know for me, it just at the very base is, if when you're sitting there and you try to be quiet, and so then all of a sudden all these thoughts start coming, if you come back and just focus on your breathing is always the thing that I hear. If you just focus on your breathing, it's hard to do anything else, and
Right.
that helps to really quiet your mind. And then it's amazing, right? The things that just sort of crystallize for you.
Right, right. And it's sometimes it's like you wouldn't think, because I don't hear like an audible God voice. I hear that some people do feel like they do, but for me it's kind of like my own voice, but I know it's not me, you know what I'm saying? So it's like you also got to identify what that message is for you, how that message comes to you, and that you got to create the space for that.
And so for you, it feels like it's internal. And right. And some people say, I mean, God is within us. We are God. I mean, there's so many different ways to define it,
Mhm.
but I think we're all sort of saying the same thing, that if you get still and quiet and listen,
Mhm.
um, things will reveal themselves.
Right.
Right. That's kind of if you kind of distill it down.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so for you, when you think about some of those layers, right, that you have to peel back, when you
Mhm.
were having that resistance, what was that resistance, do you think, about for you, which I define as the third L, layers? What was that you were resisting against?
I think a little bit of what you said with fear of success, because I have like this inner struggle where I am drawn to do more, push myself out there, do things that are like maybe not the average person would push themselves out there to do. At the same time, I feel shy and withdrawn. Like I really just want to um, just hide. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily. So I have that inner struggle, and I feel like that is because God wants me to do something greater, so He gives me that desire. But maybe me and on my personal level maybe not necessarily want that. So I think it's the fear of success and the unknown, and something that's calling me to something greater. Um,
And which, it's so ironic. I'm kind of shocked. And again, this is the first time we're talking. And I would never have guessed that you were going to say that. And if people think lawyer, attorney, she must be aggressive. She must be, so confident and not, to use the words shy or just more internal.
right.
People wouldn't think that. So I so
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that, because I always say, for myself, it's like, I go forward in spite of my fears. And I think sometimes people, they see you, owner of your own law firm, this, that, and the other, and they make a lot of assumptions about your path, your journey, your confidence. And so just sharing that, Sabine, I think is so helpful to people watching this and listening, because they're saying, okay, maybe I have those fears. It doesn't mean I shouldn't do it.
Right, right. And it's real, because I almost feel like if I don't do it, then I get sad about not doing, like I have regrets about not doing it. So it's like a real, battle there. And I'm sure people feel the same way. Like there are things they want to do, they're afraid to do it, or shy, or for whatever insecurities that exist. But then when they don't do it, they still dealing with that inner turmoil. So it's a real thing.
And so you did. So, to pull these L's together, I mean, you honed your listening skills.
Mhm.
You connected your passions and your values, it sounds like, right, to get clear on what you wanted, which was your own law firm in this area of real estate. There were layers then that you had to work through. I mean, all of what you just shared, and then you took a leap. I mean, you have leapt. I would say you've landed. But I mean, is there anything you want to share about, even if you kind of, what it felt like to step out and put one foot in front of the other. And you mentioned at the beginning, I mean, you didn't have it all figured out. You just sort of started walking toward what called you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so say a little bit about, so the fourth L is leap.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not a huge leap. It's just a little, maybe just a toe in the water. But as you walked toward this of creating your law firm, or feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to do this in spite of my fears, what did that feel like to do it?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gwen, because you are kind of helping me to paint a picture, because I didn't really ever think of this whole path like the way that you're bringing it out. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Welcome.
Um, so for leaping, like you said, it does sound like when you say leap that it's like this big, huge, jump that you're doing, but for me, it really did feel like insignificant. Like every single day was kind of just like me trying to, mull through and kind of make it through. And it didn't feel like there were moments where it did feel very scary and big. And like I talked about that struggle, but then there were other moments where it felt insignificant. But the thing to understand is that it's okay to have those little moments and to take things one day at a time, because, after, 365 days, there's a lot that has been done. And so you're leaping in the process, even when you don't realize it. So every single step includes or creates that big jump.
That is such an important message. I mean, yes, to recap, it's so true, right? People think that it's okay, you're just going to do this big jump, but most of us, it's little steps, and then we look up and we don't even realize how far we've come or
Yeah.
what we've accomplished, and a lot of times don't even give ourselves credit for
That's
it, because we're waiting for that one big thing that we're going to check off and then pop the champagne, right?
exactly.
Yeah. And so to kind of, the next L, which is land, is that important piece of acknowledging the journey, the steps, the little leaps along the way. And we have these little landings, and whether they are internal, little understandings of ourselves and getting more courage, or the physical, getting your physical building, getting your clients. It's both sides. And I mean, probably the internal is more important, that internal journey, which everybody can't see.
Right.
And so when you've had little landings, which ties into learning,
Uh-huh.
I mean, what have been some of the biggest learnings for you in this journey? When you go back to that, I just picture this woman going, no, don't make me don't make me do it, to having your own law firm. I mean, what can you share with someone watching this who's saying, oh my gosh, I feel in that same place?
Okay. So what I've learned along the way, amongst the regrets and the things that made me happy that I did, is that the scariest thing is the thing that you should do. So I know for myself, I tended to shy away from things that I felt were too challenging. But those are the things that, one, I either regretted from not doing, and then the other times when I did do them, those were the biggest sort of like accomplishments, the biggest things that I could look back on and really say, oh wow, like great, I did that. So the scariest things are the things that you have to push towards, you have to push through to accomplish. And even if you fail or have some stumbling blocks, it's okay, it's growing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A gentleman that I interviewed, he said, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough.
Okay.
And that's what I'm hearing. I thought of that when you said that. And there's some people listening to this going, oh God, do I
Do I have to?
do I have to? And so you're right. And sometimes, and I always say, and I want to know what this means to you, the way I define living a life on your terms through the people that I've interviewed, there's this commonality that they look at their values in life and they look at their passions. And when you marry those two, it gives them their purpose. And because it's not just about the job, right? And so for me, if you'll indulge me for a second, I'll give you this example, and then I want to hear how you define it. This past year, I was at this place, like a fork in the road of, I'm a 4-term councilwoman, right? And I was thinking about running for mayor, which is a bigger commitment, or doing more work with my life on your terms and retreats and down in the Bahamas. So one was was more about freedom. One was more committing to my community.
Mm-hmm.
And I was tortured, Sabine. I was like, I really want to do this one, and I want to do this one. And they were both scary, but I literally looked and said, okay, what are my values? And I talked about freedom and flexibility and these things. So even though I really wanted, and maybe at some point I will run for mayor or higher office, the timing wasn't right now. Okay. It wasn't just that I was afraid, but I was afraid of this other one, jumping into the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to my values and my passions and got clear and said, I'm going to let go of this one for now and pursue this. Right. Because that's how I define a life on my terms. Right. And so I think, getting clear on those things. And so for you, when you think about your life and what you've created, I mean, how do you define living a life on your terms?
I think that's great what you said. And I definitely agree with that. Making sure that the thing that you're pushing toward still aligns with your values and your ultimate goals. And for me, creating a life on my own terms is finding out where is the happiness, like what actually part of my life is making me happy, and trying to create more of that. So like for me and my firm, that means to not be afraid to expand in terms of bringing people on, allowing myself to delegate things, and so that I have more time and space to focus on the things that make me happy, because that is the real, that's where the real value is. It's not in the money or whatever it is. It's in, what's making you happy. Like, I have a 6-year-old daughter. I want to spend time with her. I want to have quality time with her. So I have to build things that allow me to have my time. So I think that finding your happiness, like being honest with yourself and what makes you happy, and creating a way to have more of that.
Right, because it's not just about our work. I mean, hopefully we're all have the privilege of doing work that we're passionate about and that we love, but our life is more than just that. Like you said, your values are family, right? And when we live in alignment with those values, we do find happiness, right? That's where our happiness lies. So you work on that, finding that balance of your passion for law, your passion for family, and trying to create a balance of those two.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and that's pretty much it. You can't focus only on work or thinking. I think what I want to say is that you can't build your life for what other people are going to perceive as you being happy, but it has to be really what actually is making you happy, And so some people may see, an attorney and think that success is, working and, building and growing and making millions of dollars. But you can have a well-balanced life that includes being a professional and being a mom and being a wife and being, any other thing that you want, that you want to do. You don't have to be a millionaire in every category, right? But all these things could be used to design your life as long as they make you happy.
That is like the gem right there, Sabine, because the reason I called this podcast Life on Your capitalized terms is, and then that second L, which is right, what I call love, that looking at your passions and your values. And again, your values, because so many of us, we haven't even taken inventory of our own values. We're living our parents' values or our friends' values or society's values. There's so many messages that we're inundated with about what is success. Right. And so, if we're constantly chasing that external definition of what we think it is, it's like a mirage. You never actually get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the scariest thing is to get where you think, you know, where you reach the mark where you thought you were headed to, and you find out it's not the happiness that you were expecting it to be. That's really scary. So it's like critical really for us to evaluate, you know, what is of value to us, you know.
Yeah. If you get to that, you're a millionaire in
Yeah.
whatever category, and you go, oh my gosh, I'm not happy. I'm still not happy. Then what do you do? You know? And so if people can pause,
Mm-hmm.
listen and pause and reassess, I mean, and it changes at different points in our life, you know, what we value, right? And why does that matter so much to you? I mean, was there a time where you felt like you were chasing the external, or did you have that experience of getting to a plateau that you thought you were supposed to arrive at, and have a lesson from that?
Absolutely. You know, I struggled with that because you know, when you're young, you're kind of like naive about a lot of things. And, you know, I thought, okay, once I, you know, graduate college, I'll be happy. Once I, have like a full-time job, I'll be happy. You know, once I become a lawyer, I'm really going to be happy. It's going to be great. You know, once I have a nice car, I'll be happy. Or I have a house, I'll be happy. Like, it's not about those things. I mean, it's great for you to have goals and ambitions and have, a plan for yourself of where you're going, but you really have to, and it can't be in an external thing. It has to be an internal thing, because everything outside is really not going to do it, you know? And so I had that realization when I got to those places, those points, that things are still missing, you know? So I had to focus on, one, building my relationship with God and feeling fulfilled within, and then recognizing that the things that were making me happy, I already had, you know, which was my family.
That's so amazing. It's like coming back to, wait, I already had these things. I just had to kind of switch my mindset.
Change your perception.
And be present with them. You know, here you are, they're right in front of you, and you might be looking at the next fancy car or the next bigger house, and the things that truly brought you happiness were sitting right there.
Absolutely.
But if you're not present, you're missing out on all of that.
Yes.
So that's kind of, when you got to those places, what inspired you to even pursue this internal journey.
Yes. I think for me, it started, I read the book by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth.
Yes.
And so that's what started like my journey. I was like my baby step into like this whole world of spirituality. And so it made me kind of realize, or open my eyes to this whole being present. Like, there's a whole realm that we're not living in. You know, we're just completely absent from it because we're always on to the next. And it's so refreshing to be able to not worry about the next moment and just be here right now.
And it's amazing you said that. I'm actually listening to the podcast series of A New Earth right now. And it's amazing, first of all, but it is a practice, right? It is a practice to continually bring yourself back to the present.
Right.
And so it's not like you're there or you weren't.
Right.
And so what does it feel like, Sabine? I love this. So I love that you had the opportunity to experience those external things, right, of success.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you feel now? I mean, sort of now that you've landed and like you're in this different place. I mean, what does it feel like to be able to marry the internal and the external, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like I don't feel like I've arrived, you know, like I don't feel like I've landed. I feel like I'm still a student and I'm still trying to, you know, figure this whole thing out, because like you said, our happiness evolves a little bit, you know, as we grow and learn new things. So I still feel like I'm trying to like pinpoint, you know, that right feeling, but it's refreshing in the sense that I'm not so much worried about what's going to happen, because I know, like, you know, ultimately everything will be okay. But I still feel like it's still sort of like a learning. It's sort of like fluid. You kind of just like, you know, have to be just okay with it and patient with it, and allow yourself to just grow and evolve in whatever direction, life takes you or your internal compass takes you.
But I love that you said internal compass. Life on your terms, powered by your inner compass. It's true. But as I listen to you, what I feel is like a sense of relief. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna be okay, because now you have these tools and this clarity. You're
Right.
not just bouncing around on this journey. Even if you don't have all the answers, you've
Right.
got like this, I want to say, it sounds kind of corny, but like almost like this superpower. Like you've got you have your compass. And
Right.
so it's the rest doesn't really matter. You can kind of
Right.
like rest easy is the feeling that I get. You'll figure it out. You don't have to have it all figured out right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what it is. And it doesn't always feel like that in every moment. It's not always like I'm walking around like, yeah, fa la la, it's all great. I still have my moments of stress and, need to seek out meditation and all that stuff. But, then I'm always brought back to the fact that, it's going to be okay that you had a moment.
Exactly.
Fine,
Yeah, we're still human, right? It's it's still human. And so, and you're right. And like when I describe this, the 7L framework, it's not linear. It's not like through the L's and we've arrived, right? It's circular, and you can actually be in a couple places. You can be working through layers and leaping at the same time and listening the whole way through. And the 7th L, though, it is level up. So, when you think about, I mean, maybe that's an internal kind of, what's next, or an external, or both. So when you think about kind of like just leveling up for you, just that next little, piece, notch up, what is that for you?
So for me, well, the space that I find myself in, I am just trying to learn. Like I just feel like I just want to learn as much as I can. Trying not to be afraid of going through things where I feel resistance from. So I would say within, just from the top of the year, I just been pushing myself to do things that I would normally not do or be afraid to shy away from. And if I'm feeling like it's aligning, like you said, if I feel like it's okay, is this the path I want to go? Okay, but I'm scared of it. Okay, go anyway. So it's that, and it's just just learning. I just want to either know more spiritually and know more within my craft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions for you. Thinking of like someone like Eckhart Tolle, other spiritual teachings, when we talk about meditation, but then also you're talking about God, right? Is all of that for you, is that all the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
All one thing?
Yeah, for me it is. I mean, when I read A New Earth when Eckhart was on Oprah, like a little like a while ago.
Yeah.
And so after that, I became like a Christian, and I heard somebody say, like a friend of mine was asking, should I read this book? I hear it's like the anti-Bible. And I'm like, no, like it's not. So when I read it, to me, it's like explaining exactly what, kind of the teachings of, I mean, I don't want to get too deep, but like basically what the Bible teaches in terms of how Jesus was, like to me, it aligns for me. My understanding is that it aligns for me. And so I don't see them as different. I get that not everybody calls it the same thing or doesn't recognize it as the same thing. But I also, in my opinion, don't think God really cares,
Exactly. It's all taking in information that you're learning, and you apply in a way that
right.
works
in in the same direction. So for me, it aligns.
Yeah, exactly. I just was curious about that. And what is the thing that you're most afraid of now, if you'll share? Is there something that's looming out there that you're like, oh God, no, here I go? Is it expanding your practice, or growing your real estate, your own business, or what's sort of the thing that's looming out there that you want to kind of take on?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Growing my practice, because in order for me to have more freedom, but still, have the practice do well, I need to grow it.
Yeah.
And it's a scary place, not knowing what's going to happen, but I have to keep reminding myself that whatever it is, it's going to be fine.
you've been fine this far, right? So
You know?
if you look at history, you're gonna be fine, and but yeah, it's you almost know when that feeling creeps up. It's like, oh no, am I really gonna have to do this?
Exactly how it feels.
Yeah, I know, but it's also, it makes us feel alive, right? And you know that you're pursuing, you're living in alignment with with the things that you value in your life.
Right.
Is there anything else, Sabine, that that you just want to share, for others that may be a little bit early in this journey, or they're like, I think I hear something calling, or they know something's bubbling up, but they're just, not sure if they want to listen, or what to do next. I mean, what would sort of be your advice?
I mean, I would say to try it. You know, and really just try it, because we don't know what the right thing to do, or the right direction sometimes, really, unless we try it. And sometimes the answer is not provided until you start making a move. You know what I mean? Until you find yourself at step 2, then you might have the tools to get you to step 3. But if you're at step 1, you're like, how am I going to get to step 3? You probably don't have it yet. But maybe you can get to step 2. So I would say try it, whatever it is that you feel like is calling you and like really drawing you in. I would say, try it. What's the worst that could happen? You'll fail. Okay, now and you'll move on to the next, or you'll go over that hurdle.
But I love what you're saying. So basically, don't think too much in your head about the 20 steps down the line.
Right.
Think about, if you sort of have this vague calling to you, just take a step in that direction and see what happens.
Right.
Yeah, that's all you need to worry about. You don't need to worry about 25 steps.
Right.
I love it. I love it. I have so enjoyed talking with you this morning. And
Right.
if people want if they want real estate advice, legal advice, or just to reach out to you to talk more about your journey, how can they best reach you?
Sure. So they could go to my business website, which is franco-lawfirm.com, or they could find me on Instagram at Sabine, SABINE _ the purpose lawyer.
The purpose lawyer. Now they'll know the meaning behind that. Such a pleasure talking with you, Sabine. Thank you for being so open and sharing your journey.
Absolutely. Anyone I can help, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Gwen.